Hello and welcome to Where the Road Rises, Law, Lessons, Legacy. With me, your host, Eileen Curlin-Walsh. Today, we welcome back to Channel 4 the force of nature that is the Honourable Karen Yarborough, Clerk of Cook County. Karen is the first woman and the first African American to hold that prestigious and demanding position. Prior to her current role, Karen served as the Cook County Recorder of Deeds, where she advocated for property owners and spearheaded a national campaign to abolish property fraud. And before leading the Cook County Recorder's Office, Karen served many years in the Illinois House of Representatives, where she fought for greater public health and safety, quality of life, and social justice. Karen has been described as a voice for the voiceless and has received numerous awards for her community service, her advocacy, and legislative work, including a Nobel Peace Prize nomination. We are honored to have Karen share her stories, experience, wisdom, and advice with us today. Welcome, Karen, to Where the Road Rises.
It's certainly a pleasure to be back.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Why don't we start, Karen, with your early years, where you grew up, some of your earliest memories, how your childhood was, your teen years, and the political, cultural landscape you grew up in.
Well, most people think that I'm from Illinois. I am not. And most people think that I was always in politics. I was not. I kind of evolved. So I was born in Washington, D.C. My father attended Howard University, and he was a pharmacy major. And that's where he met my mother. They married there. He finished school, and then he went back to his home, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I was about, I guess, maybe 3 years old when we went back to Pittsburgh. So those really, really early years, I don't remember a lot, except that it was fun. It was fun. We lived in the country. We lived about 24 miles outside of Pittsburgh. And my grandparents lived in the house in front of us, and so it was nice to be able to visit with grandparents because they make a big fuss over grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And I was the oldest grandchild, so I was kind of spoiled.
Oh,
Yet they expected me to be responsible. And I heard that so much in my early years because I was the oldest grandchild, I was the oldest child, about being responsible. And just remember that your siblings are looking up to you, so you have to be the example. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that I remembered about my early years. Certainly, my father, he spent a lot of time outside of our household because he was building a business. He actually started a pharmacy in Pittsburgh. It was about 24 miles away from where we lived. And my mom was a homemaker. So when Dad came home, he was trying to catch up, with everything that was going on at home. My mother was an expert homemaker. I mean, she was able to juggle everything. So I watched her juggle us, helping us with our homework and education, making sure the meals are on the table, going to the schools and all of those kinds of things. And yet she wanted to work outside the home as well. And so she did. So when I look at my grandparents and that they were business people, and I look at my parents, it kind of, there was some expectation, I think, that I would probably do something very, very similar.
Wonderful. So they were your early mentors and role models.
Yes. All I saw around me were people like my grandparents, and those were people who were entrepreneurs, and they were looking for ways to make things better. And my grandmother was really involved in the community, and she would take me to community meetings, to just all kinds of things. And my eyes were wide open, you know, and after we would leave these meetings, she would explain to me what went on. Because I was just a dutiful child. I just sat there and listened. I tried to understand. But on the way back home, she would always explain to me, now what we were discussing was this, and the reason why this is important. And so those are my early years, and I just remember how important it was to be honest, to be open, to step up and stand up when you need to. And I got that kind of sort of from my grandmother.
Yeah. And I can see the seeds early of both a business life and a political life, and an honest, ethical one.
Yes. So that I would have to say, as much as my parents were very instrumental in my life, but my grandmother was always hovering. We used to spend summers with her when we moved away from where she lived, and she taught us so many different things, and it was just a joy to be around my grandparents.
The power of the extended family.
Yes.
So often, I always, Karen, want to know with my guests, you know, what was at the heart? Where did you begin? Where did the gift begin? And so often we see that strong family and the extended family, so important to children.
I agree. My father always instilled upon all of myself and my siblings that everybody is here for a purpose, and everyone has the seeds of greatness down inside of them, and as a result of that, it's up to us to figure out what our talents are and gifts, to nurture those talents and gifts, and then go out and make a difference in life.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
What a marvelous beginning. And before you became an elected official, you were in business for yourself.
Yes. Again, grandparents and parents. My dad was a State Farm agent. He passed away last year. He was in business for 50 years. So before he did that, of course, I told you he was a pharmacist. Well, the independent pharmacies kind of went the way of the buffalo. And so my dad decided on a new career, and he got into insurance. He was a State Farm agent, and he was a State Farm agent for 50 years. Well, I knew he was a captive agent, and I understood what that meant. And it meant that he worked for the company, and he was encouraging me to become a State Farm agent as well. And I told him, at the time I was a realtor, I told him, I said, you know, I think I might do better if I was an independent agent, because that way I could work for the person that needs the coverage and identify what kinds of plans they would need, rather than to fit, you know, it's kind of taking a round peg and trying to fit it into a square hole. Rather than do that, actually go out there in the marketplace and identify what my customer needs. And so he said, oh, that's a good idea. And I said, well, thank you. Yeah. So I started an independent agency where I could work for the customer, getting the coverages that they need. Now, you know, the insurance business, at that time, I was probably one of the first women in our area, and I was in the Proviso area that was an independent agent. That we used to have a breakfast club, and so the Allstate agent, the Prudential agent, the State Farm agent, we would all come together on Monday mornings for breakfast, and we would talk about what was going on in our industry. Well, we came from different places, but we were serving, you know, the community, and I thought that was really helpful. But I was the only woman there, and it's been kind of the way it's been in my life, being the only woman or the first woman, you know, there. But that's no excuse. I mean, that's nice. I mean, I was born a woman, and so, you know, I had nothing to do with that, but I still had to make my way and also make a contribution.
And now be a role model, whether you like it or not, for young people and for women and for African American women and for professional women, to show them how you blaze that trail and teach them the way. Karen, was there a turning point when you had your successful business that politics came knocking, or the idea came to you, or where did the idea then of going into public service arise?
Well, my husband introduced me to a gentleman who wanted to run for office. And he said, Karen, you have great organizational skills. Could you help him? And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about, I mean, I vote, that's the extent of what I do, you know. And he said, but still, he really needs help, and I think that you could be helpful to him. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And he was a wonderful candidate. I mean, everything was in place. You know, I just kind of helped him with his scheduling, gave him some pointers on how to project himself and what have you. You know, he won. He won that race against a 5-term incumbent. And he served, and I was like, wow. I said, this was great. You know, it's high energy. You get to work with somebody who's good and has the ideas, you know, that you subscribe to, and so it was really great. So he served in that office, and then somebody else came to me and asked me to run their campaign, and I'm like, wow, we're on a roll here. And so I shared with, you know, that person. She didn't want to take my advice. However, you know, I gave it to her. I gave her everything I had to give because I wanted her to win. She didn't. She went into an area, you know, she talked about things she didn't know about. And I don't think we should do that, because somebody's going to, you know, find you out, you know, and that's what happened. Yeah. So she didn't. But after that time, you know, I start thinking about, well, maybe I could serve in some capacity somewhere. I was already a member of a number of different boards and what have you. And I said, but I still wanted to continue to run my business, and I'm only one person, so I just kind of put it on the back burner. People were scouting me, saying, Karen, we need you to run for mayor. We need you to run for a township. We need you to run for school board. And I'm like, whoa, I can't do all of that. But I started paying attention to politics. And I started thinking about every year, twice a year, we get a reminder. And it's called our tax bill. And when you look at all of those taxes that you pay on your tax bill and the people who are behind it, meaning the people who represent you at those different offices. See, I have no problem. You know, somebody wants to be the mayor, great. Just be a good mayor. Somebody wants to be the trustee, great. Be a good trustee, go to work and, you know, advocate on behalf. Be my voice. Well, I would see in these different areas that people weren't doing that. Once they get elected, then, oh my goodness, they go off on a tangent somewhere. And so I'm like, what happens? What happens to people after they get elected? And did they forget everything that they said that they were going to do? Yeah. Did they forget that they're only there to represent my voice and everybody else's voice? So I decided to run for office. Yeah, I did. I decided to run for office. Now, my first race, I decided to run for state representative. And then, you know, in the middle of the campaign, I get a call saying, oh, no, Karen, we want you to run for Senate. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, I'm not the political animal and what have you. I've got my sights set on this particular office, and these are the reasons why I want to run for this office. And I think I can balance it with my family, my business, and I think I can do this. And I told him, I said, no, oh, well, you could win. And I was like, maybe, but this is what I can do right now. So I ran and I lost. I know. But anyway, once I started looking at this whole thing, okay, why do you lose? Did I not get my message out? Did I not have enough money? What didn't I do? Well, I'm going against an incumbent, and it's, you know, it's hard, you know. So I had to make a decision at that time. Am I going to run again, or am I going to just say, okay, you don't want me? And that's easy to get there and say, you know, after you spent, and I think I spent close to $40,000 on that race. Now, this was back in the 90s. So I had to make this decision, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to go ahead and run again. And whatever I didn't do, I'm going to double it. I'm going to do more. I'm going to say more. I'm going to go more places. And then I'm going to learn this process. Because there was some voter fraud. Have you heard of that before?
Well,
a little bit.
Musings.
Yeah. Well, anyways, but I didn't really know the process. I just thought that everybody goes and votes, and then they tally up the votes, and either you got more than I got or something.
Yes.
Well, didn't quite happen like that. So I said, okay, I got to really get involved. I've got to find out how this happens, why that happened, and then I'm going to run again, and I'm going to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen to anybody again. And it's just so ironic that now I'm the clerk of Cook County.
Yes.
And we are, you know, charged with running the elections for over 120 election sites and cities and municipalities throughout Cook County. That is really something.
Yeah, and
you know,
it's a full circle.
It is.
And what sort of adversity, before we get to your role as the clerk now, what sort of adversity? I'm sure that you did come up against some racism, maybe sexism, as you said, you were often the only woman running.
Yes.
Maybe
yeah.
the only African American running.
Well, sexism all the way through my life. I mean, it's just been there. When I was in business, I'll never forget that I had a client to come in, and he says, "I'd like to talk to the boss." And so I said, "So how can I help you?" And was he in? Oh. So, you know, I didn't want to go there, okay? Yeah. I just wanted to try to, well, you know what kind of insurance are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for some liability insurance for my business, and I really need to know what kind of insurance I need. And I said, well, I'm sure I can help you. Well, is he not in? No. I just told him no. So why don't you sit down here? Now, what kind of business do you have? And I just went right into the whole thing and started talking about it. Yeah. So then he says, you know, you do know what you're talking about. It sounds like it anyway. And I said, well, yes, sir, I do. I said, I've written quite a few of these policies for business owners. And so, yes, I do know. And so he says, well, maybe I don't need the boss today. I'm like, oh, my God, okay. All right, so I wrote his policy for him. And he says, well, you know, whoever he is, just tell him he's got a good employee here. You can imagine, I mean, I held my tongue, okay, because I wanted to write the business, but I also wanted him to know that I was competent. I knew my area, that was my area of expertise. I knew about business. I mean, I started one, and he could trust me to do the right thing by him. So sexism, absolutely, all the way up through the General Assembly. Some senator, I was coming onto the House floor, walks on the floor, puts his arm around my waist and makes some inappropriate comment. And so I moved away from him, and we're still walking, and I told him, I said, you know, Senator, I thought better of you. I said, however, you could be my first sexual harassment suit. Then he moved really away from me. So I think if you're a woman and if you grew up over the 60s, 70s, 80s, you, in some way, form, or fashion, you have been harassed, you know, sexually on some level. Something has happened, and I think I'm so glad that women are finally telling their stories, because, you know, to suffer in silence and still to try to project that you're competent and you're honest and you're open and all of those things, yet you have this little gnawing thing that happened to you where somebody tried to pull you down and tried to get a rise out of you by saying something inappropriate. I mean, I think all women have a story. More and more today, I think people are being a little more careful.
More careful, and those women are telling their stories and being heard.
Yeah.
Being heard in a way they have never been listened to before.
I welcome it.
Yes,
I welcome it.
Yes. It's one of those wonderful environments that so many women, I've had 80, 90-year-old women say they never thought they would see in their lifetime.
Yes.
So many things we never thought we'd see in our lifetime, and they're coming to pass. So when people become very dispirited about the world and the condition of politics or nations, there's a lot of good things happening alongside the bad.
I agree, and you can be the good thing that is happening. I mean, you can make the difference that you're looking for. You really can. I mean, if you don't lend yourself to, if somebody brings some negative story to you and you don't lend yourself to the story and you turn it around and make something positive out of it, that person's not coming back to you.
You've used it as a stepping stone.
Yes.
Karen, you have been described as the voice for the voiceless. So tell us a little bit about the advocacy that you have done for the poor, the disenfranchised. I know you worked with those who had AIDS, incarcerated. You did work towards abolishing the death penalty. So what
We got that done. You know, we did about, yeah, that's what the Nobel Peace Prize was all about.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of work with ex-offenders in particular, and people who are incarcerated. So you do something bad and you go to prison. I mean, life shouldn't be over at that point. Hopefully you got the point that don't do that again, right? But in many cases, people who do things in community, they come back to that same community. And what are they met with? All kinds of things. So we have to kind of bring them back to community, find out where are the missing things in their life, get them back so that they can be productive in the community. I used to get letters a lot from people who were incarcerated, and they have nothing else to do. I mean, they are in this, and I've been to a number of these prisons and seen the cells that they're in. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And what's especially horrible are the women that are locked up. You know, when a woman goes to prison, the whole family goes to prison. The children go to prison. And I don't mean literally they go, but who's left at home, especially if it was a single mom. So I went to Dwight when it was the prison for women. I went down there quite a few times just to encourage women that they weren't the scourge of the earth. In many cases, when you have a woman who's in prison, there's a man behind it some kind of way, form, or fashion. Several women that I met who were murderers, they had murdered a man who had done unthinkable things to her through her life, and she just was fed up and was just done. And she chose that route. Well, we know that that's not the route to choose, but I don't know. I haven't walked in these women's shoes, so I don't know how they did what they did, meaning how they put up with what they put up with. But the thing that I would always say to them, to start off my conversations with them, I'd ask a question: what is the difference between you, the lawbreaker, and me, the lawmaker? And they'd all kind of, you know, look and say, what, I don't know, what is it? And I said, I didn't get caught. And they're like, oh my God, what did you do? And I said, you know, it's not really about what I did. I'm not perfect, and you're not perfect. And are there things that I've done that I didn't get caught for? And I don't mean killing and none of that kind of stuff. But, you know, did I go over the speed limit? Probably a few times, you know. Did I not do something? All of us have done something.
Absolutely.
Some things. And when we're being so judgmental about other people, you know, there's a reason why they tell you, you know, when you point at somebody else, all these fingers are pointing back to you. What have you done?
Yes.
So when I would tell these women that, you know, what's the difference between the two of us and I didn't get caught, then they want to know what was it, you know. And, you know, I do remember a time when I was a teenager, I didn't have a driver's license. And somebody let me drive their car. And we got in an accident, not because of me, but because of, the, you know, you have to do defensive driving, you know, which I learned much later. I was 16 years old, you know, and I didn't have a driver's license. So going to the police department, I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, I could just see my life going down the tube, you know, here. But a policeman told me, well, now, why did you think you could drive without a license? And I just told him, I said, well, I can drive. And he says, yes, but you need to have a license. And I says, yes, sir. And he says, listen, we're going to let you off because I think that you're going to get it right. And I did. I went and got my driver's license. So that could have turned out very different for me.
Yeah.
You know, very, very different. I mean, it could have been a situation where they threw the book at me, they would have fingerprinted me, and, you know, I mean, my life would have turned out very, very different. So I have when I think about people being imprisoned, and I think about they're going to serve their debt, but I think about coming out. So my very first bill was a bill to give ex-offenders a temporary driver's license or temporary ID so that they could get a job if they got out. If you don't have identification, you can't do anything. You can do absolutely nothing, it seems like. And I had a time trying to get that passed. I went to talk to Secretary White, and he said, Karen, what you probably don't understand is we take this very seriously about these driver's licenses and IDs. There are some bad people out there, and they use them for all kinds of things. So we would want to know that the person was who they say they are before we gave them, any kind, even if it was temporary. So I said, well, they're in corrections, so don't they know who these people are? And he said, you know what? You need to talk to the Department of Corrections. And so when I talked to that director, and he says, the people that are in prison, we know who they are. But when they come in and they say that instead of you come into prison and you say, I'm Karen Yarbrough, and you have no identification on you. And I said, no, Eileen, we know you. Nope, I'm Karen Yarbrough. They have to process you in that way. But that's an alias. And so to the secretary's credit, what he was trying to get me to understand is there are people who work the system, and they've got it down to a science, and they've been using the system on all kinds of ways to get around things. So he wanted to just make sure that the people were who they said they were. I got that bill passed after a year or so. But I learned so much about corrections, and I learned so much about the Secretary of State's office and how important it is to get it right.
Yeah. One of the things you said reminded me, Karen, of Sister Helen Progene. I'm sure she was a role model for you when you were working with those people. And one of the things she said was, we are all more than the worst thing we have ever done. And that was my experience when I worked as a public defender and worked with those for whom not many else people were looking at or caring about. Those words would come to me. Sister Helen Progene said, what if we were all judged by the worst thing we had ever done? And it sobers every one of us.
That's
I
true.
think that's so beautiful and so honest for you to say the difference between the lawmaker and the lawbreaker is getting caught. And I'm sure that you instantly would have gained their trust that way.
Yes.
I love it.
And Sister Progene is a saint. She was very instrumental in helping us to get the death penalty abolished in Illinois. There were so many steps to that process. And when I talk about it, it was such an emotional bill in the first place, because there's that side that said, hey, look, people need to die. Okay, and I'm like, okay, maybe they do. Do you want to flip the switch? Do you want to administer the lethal injection? Well, no, that's not my job. Well, it's somebody's job. Do you think they like doing that? Can you imagine going to work every day and you're the one that has to administer? You have to pull out the guillotine and let's cut the head off. You do that. That's your job. I don't think you want to do that. And then who's God? And who owns death? And listen, we don't get it right enough. Okay, all of those people who were on death row, and you hear it almost every day, where somebody was accused of something that they didn't do. I can't even imagine, but I can imagine that somebody out there. I hope that Illinois has never executed somebody who was not guilty. Was not guilty. I hope we didn't do that. When we execute someone, we execute them in the name of the state. I don't want that on my conscience. Yeah. And when I went to Rome, we were invited to Rome they actually lit up the Colosseum to celebrate Illinois becoming the 16th state to get it right. You know, there are whole countries that do not have the death penalty. They don't. I mean, they will, and in fact, they think like I do, and, it's much probably more humane and better. We put them in prison, and we leave them there for the rest of their life, okay, without possibility of parole. Now, the other side would say, well, that costs us a lot of money. You know what costs us a lot of money? One death penalty case. You know how long they go on? Some of them go on for 20, 30 years. You know how much money that is for just one person? A lot. Yeah. So why not, if they've done something so egregious, and we have those people, there are people out there that absolutely positively deserve it. I'm not flipping the switch. I'm not going to administer the death penalty. I'm going to leave that for God to do, okay?
Oh, That's wonderful. Let's move on now to your current position.
Okay.
The first woman and the first African American in your role as Cook County Clerk. How does that speak to, how does that define your role? How does it shape your perspective in the office?
You know, I look at it as yet another opportunity for me to use the skill set that I have and doing the work that I've already been about doing. Elections, I told you that I had a negative experience in, becoming a candidate. And so now I see the inner workings of it. And I understand how, once you put all your eggs in this basket, you're running for this office, you want to put your best foot forward, and you spend money again, and then the process isn't fair. Unfairness to me is way high up there with, if it's fair, then whatever happens, we want people to trust the system. You got to trust the system. And when you don't trust the system and you lose your faith in the system, then what do we have? Really, what do we have? Mm-hmm. So I think I am uniquely prepared for this office, and also uniquely prepared to do what has to be done in the very near future, and that is absorb the duties of the Recorder of Deeds office and make these two offices one office.
So let's talk about that, Karen. That is a momentous task.
It really is. It really is, and we are in the midst of, first of all, I had to get my arms around the clerk's office. And so we're leaving here today, and I'm actually going over to courthouse to see what's going on in the clerk's office. In most of the courthouses, the clerk's office and the recorder's office, they're side by side. One thing that I think the former clerk did that I just really am happy about is most of the people that work in the clerk's office are cross-trained, which is tremendous. It's really tremendous. So that at least lets me know that I have a workforce that's open to learning new things. Because there are some people who they may be in one department and on election day we need them, and they come and they work in elections. Mm-hmm. That's great to have, and then also for an employee, I think it gives them a sense of being needed, not just for one little thing, but they know how to do many things.
Yes.
So we are in the throes of getting lined up. We have to have it done by December of 2020. I've had a couple of meetings with the interim Cook County Recorder, Ed Moody, who is, he's a former commissioner, and he's trying to get his arms around the recorder's office. So I'm having meetings with him and staff. I left a number of people behind because I wanted to make sure that he had, an infrastructure there and he wasn't going into the office blind. So I know the recorder's office, and I know it very well. I know the initiatives we've done there, and I want those to continue. And I'm learning the clerk's office, and it is monumental, but we're going to get it done, and we're going to cross-train the people in the recorder's office to learn how to do the clerk's work as well. Now, for the most part, they don't. They only do recording work, but that's all they have to do there. So we'll see who steps up, and we're going to give them opportunities to learn something new. We will train them and give them the tools that they need. But I've found in the clerk's office there's some wonderful employees there that are multi-talented, multidisciplined, educated. I'm just really excited about the work that we're doing right now.
And why did you tell our viewers a little bit about what the clerk's office has done? Because I was surprised when I was researching for this interview, the vast array of services that falls under the county clerk's office.
Yes, I think people kind of get it mixed up about, the City of Chicago and the clerk's office. So City of Chicago has the Chicago Board of Elections, We handle the elections for all of Cook County except Chicago. So that's 120 towns and villages, okay? And so we oversee the elections on April 2nd, which is coming up very, very soon. And we're all revved up. We're really excited about the new voting equipment that we have. That voting equipment is going to be tested in 3 townships, and some of the judges, we're still short of judges. We wish we could get more judges to be involved in this process. And if we can't get all we need, then we're going to pull people out of these different departments to make sure people have a good election, you know.
Well, perhaps we could tell our audience that they can be judges.
Yes, they can.
They could step up.
Yes, they can go to our website, Cook County Clerk, and they can sign up right there. Someone will call them, we'll get them some training, and even though it's so tight and so close right now, we can still use them to help us with this process.
Beautiful.
So it's going to be a big day. It'll be actually my second election, but the first election was just a few, municipalities. This will be all of Cook, and I'm really, really looking forward to it.
And I'm sure with you at the helm, it's going to be wonderful. So we've talked about some of the excitement of holding high office and how you got there, Karen. What about the dark side? How do you navigate when everything's falling apart? Your marriage, your children, this coveted work-life balance. What's your perspective on when you don't like what you see going on?
Well, when I don't like what I see going on, I try to do something about it. I try to, first of all, I put myself in the other person's shoes and try to figure out, well, why is this person doing this? What is the point here? And people are people. I mean, they really are. And some of the things that I have seen and heard beg the question. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. This is wrong. Mm-hmm. I just try to do my best every day. And when I see, if somebody asks me about, do you think this is right? I just tell them the truth. I think it's wrong. I think you need to do this. What they do, of course, is something else. And I just hope it doesn't, for new people coming along that want to be elected, I hope they get it right. I mean, it's not as much as people think it's a glamorous job, because you might be in a newspaper, you're on television or what have you. The glamour is getting the job done for the people that you're there to serve. And if people understand that this is a job of service. Now, could I make more money with having a skill set that I have in the job market that's out there? Absolutely. But I prefer to do public service. I get such a thrill when somebody's eyes are open to a process that they didn't understand and it helps them. Then they become an advocate for themselves and their family. So even if it's incremental that way, I love it. I just think public service is great, and I hope more people will avail themselves to having a job in public service. It really is good work.
And Karen, I was going to ask you, what would you say to that young person who's kind of starting out in life? What would you say about business? What would you say about public service? Would you encourage them to run? And it sounds like you would.
I do it all the time. When I see leadership step up, when I see that in somebody, I will have a conversation. Come here for a minute. Let me talk to you about something. Have you ever thought? And for women, do you know that's usually the one thing we usually shy away from running for office. And it usually takes a woman to talk to a woman and say, hey, you know what? You'd be a really good senator. Mm-hmm. You'd be a really good county board president. You'd be a really good... And then they start thinking of themselves, wow, nobody ever told me that before. So I tell people that all the time. Mm-hmm. I encourage them. We get the government we deserve, okay? So when the good people don't step up, you know what we get? Okay? Yeah. So that is what happens. Good people won't step up. They think they're not good enough. They don't have enough education. They have more excuses. But you have a responsibility. If you live in a community, you need to connect somewhere, somehow, to make that community better.
Absolutely. That's terrific. So now, as you look back at that life, you've still got plenty to do, but you have a lot already under your belt. What are you most proud of, Karen?
I'm proud that I'm able to go home and have that husband I have that family that I have, and they support me. I'm proud of being a part of a larger community, and they know that I've done my best in every area that I've been in to try to make life just a little bit better for somebody who didn't even know it was me. I'm happy about the legislation that I championed in Springfield to abolish the death penalty, to regulate smoking in public places, to be that voice for people who don't have a voice. I have a big voice, and I'm going to continue to use it.
I love that. And are you optimistic for the future that your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren are now inheriting from us?
I am optimistic. I tell you, the last election cycle on the federal side, and I saw all those women who got elected, all different places and what have you, I'm just encouraged because those women stepped up. And you're going to see more and more women decide that, you know what, I'm not going to leave this up to the guy next door. I'm going to see what I can do. And when women start talking and women come together, the things that we have in common and the things that we talk about are usually centered around family, community, and what have you. And when things get heated and what have you, we take a walk. We're not getting anywhere with that conversation, so let's start a new one. And that's what makes the legislature so rich and vibrant.
Absolutely, absolutely. To bring in the voice that's not necessarily being heard. Not a better voice, certainly by no means an inferior voice, but another voice that belongs in the conversation and can advance it forward.
We used to say in Springfield all the time, a woman's place is in the House. And then we'd add the House of Representatives.
That's so perfect. I think we're going to end right there.
Okay.
Karen, do you have a quote or a biblical passage, or is there something that you have a go-to if you're ever feeling uncertain?
I have lots of quotes and lots of things. It depends on, where I am and what's going on. And then it kind of pops into my head. I taught Sunday school for about 15 years at my church. And before you can teach, you have to learn. And each week that I would teach, I would go to a class on a Friday. And our minister would teach us, what this lesson was about. And then on Sundays, Saturdays, I would kind of review the lesson and see which way I wanted to go and try to get those principles in. My class was a college class. So you can imagine being in college, you're just new in college, you're young, you're trying out your wings and all of that. I used to get lots of phone calls, and it was good because the things that they were talking about were life things, and I was able to take their questions. Well, we had a Sunday school lesson, and it talked about fear. And there's a scripture that I think in Isaiah 41:10, that says, "Fear thou not, for I am with you. Be not afraid, for I am thy God. I will comfort you, I will help you. I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness." And I had a call like that, and I gave it to this young man. He said, "I feel so much better." So, you go through your life, you learn things, you apply things that you learn, people, there's lots of people who have been instrumental in my life who have given me strength as well. And, I think that's why God put us all here. One person alone, okay, but when we're together and we're a group and we share. I think that's the way he wanted it to be.
That force of nature. Didn't I tell you? Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
Karen.
you.
That has been wonderful. I feel solace just listening to you speak
Oh, you're kind.
those words. It has been marvelous. This was our honor. Thank you so much. Thank you, viewers, for watching. There's still time to sign up as a judge, get involved in the electoral process.
Please do.
Go to the clerk's office, find out how you can serve, and I will see you next time on Where the Road Rises. Goodbye.